Games can be entertaining in a variety of ways, but some games are considered boring while others aren't. One reason many people would consider a game boring is because of a lack of gameplay, and I will be looking into if this is really a good point to criticize a game for. With how wide of a variety of games come in, you have to look at both the intent and the execution of what the developers are trying to do. You can't expect high-action gameplay in a story game, and you can't expect much of a story in a super high-action game. So I will be looking at different games, what they're trying to accomplish, and if they accomplish being good or not based off of the gameplay, but rather based off of how well it does what it's trying to do. If you look at something like Weird Gun Game, it's very clearly trying to be a high-action shooter with many combinations of guns that you can use to do crazy things with, and it does this job very well. It provides both some sort of strategic point from seeing how you can change a gun to make it more effective, while also having the basic shooter gameplay that is fun to do. However, because the fun does come from mechanical skills and stuff that is very popular, it's very easy for it to be considered a fun game because it's a very popular thing that everyone knows. A game like this wouldn't get criticized for a lack of gameplay, but instead other games, because just about all shooter games have some sort of gameplay, but that doesn't mean all shooter games are good just because they have gameplay. If we look at Rivals, the balancing of the weapons is horrible and the toxicity makes a really bad experience. But it's still a high action shooter game, but that doesn't make it necessarily good. Looking at a different genre like Incrementals, there's this game called Grass Cutting Incremental, which to many people would be boring. However, it's not trying to be a high action game. Instead, it involves constant progress, managing a ton of different currencies to slowly progress into insane numbers. It starts off small, but you can see it quickly gets really overwhelming. However, over the course of the game, you learn to manage these currencies and the numbers just grow and grow. That's the point of the game. The game isn't trying to have high action, but instead it gets its entertainment from the constant progression and having to use your brain to manage all these resources, and it does it kind of well. On the opposite end, we have Souls RNG. Something that makes incrementals good is your input affects your output. In Grass Cutting Incremental, you can run around and choose to upgrade different things, and that will affect your resources. In Souls RNG, you click a button and hope you get lucky. The game doesn't even have actual progression because the progression relies purely on getting lucky. You can click again and again, but unless you get lucky, there is no progression. And this makes the game what I would consider bad, because nothing I would do other than like using potions would affect my luck. However, even if I use potions, that's still making me rely purely on luck to do stuff. This makes the game less about progression, and you're just stuck in a loop, because instead of actually like progressing, you're just getting lucky, getting unlucky, getting lucky, getting unlucky, and it makes it not a good game because there is just no progression to a game genre that would typically have progression. So even if a game doesn't have much gameplay, it can still be good. However, with Souls RNG, it's not just the lack of gameplay that makes it bad, it's also its poor execution of the rules of the genre. Now, this next part will loop around back to a previous video I made about Eclipse because it involves tower defense games and the entertainment. Tower defense games don't really have too much gameplay as they are strategy games, similar to Incrementals how they don't have gameplay. However, that doesn't make a tower defense game bad. Tower defense games, instead of relying on mechanical skill, rely on your knowledge and how you can use it. In Tower Defense Simulator, the wide variety of towers where you can place them on the map, and the traits of the enemies forces you to bring a loadout that balances early game, middle game, late game, and economy, which makes you have to actually use your brain to be able to do stuff. If you waste all your money on damage towers in the beginning, you wouldn't be able to afford economy towers, and you may lose to a boss in the end because you couldn't afford to get the towers necessary to beat it. This means that the game does what it wants to well by being a good strategy game, because players will have to use their brain to think of all different types of things and manage them to be able to win, especially in the later modes. This loops back to my video about Eclipse's criticism of the tower defense genre, where he calls the games boring because of the lack of gameplay. However, this comes from his misunderstanding of how the games work. Just because a game doesn't have gameplay, as we can see from something like Incremental or games that are supposed to tell a story, that doesn't mean that the game is bad. The issue comes from what the game is trying to do and how it executes it. Tower Defense Simulator executes it somewhat well because players have to bring a loadout and manage where they place and manage their upgrades in a way where they won't screw them over in the end by like having only damage towers in the beginning, not being able to buy economy, and then dying to a boss. But of course, we have something that's bad like Toilet Tower Defense. Toilet Tower Defense doesn't make you think. All you have to do is just place down a unit and you win, because the units in that game are so overpowered, and like Souls RNG, its progression is purely based on getting lucky. This makes the game bad by, instead of 1, having linear progression, it's just a gambling loop, like Souls RNG is, and 2, instead of forcing you to build up your units throughout the game, think about the choices you're making, think about the loadout you're bringing, you instead just bring a tower that you place down, upgrade a few times, and you win the game, because you don't have to consider the financial consequences of that tower, because there is nothing to screw you over in the late game, because the tower just wipes out everything. So, answering the main question of this video, can a game be good without having gameplay? It's yes. A game without high-acting gameplay and stuff like that can still be good. However, it's important to, instead of relying on the gameplay, you instead look at what the game is trying to accomplish and how it accomplishes it.